Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
There's no request under roll call item A, so we'll go ahead with the roll call. Councilmember Davis.
Here.
Councilmember Kern.
Here.
Councilmember Mackin.
Here.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Here.
And Mayor Lentz.
Here. All right. So we didn't have a closed session item, so we'll move on to adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, that's for the closed session report out from April 3rd.
Oh, okay. So,
After the regular meeting.
oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Okay, Tom.
The council took up two items, direction to a real property negotiator, that being the city manager, and a pending threat of litigation. The council provide direction to both. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Okay, so now we'll move on to adoption of the agenda. Can I get a first and a second?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. So now we'll move on to awards and presentation. May is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month proclamation. I have a proclamation here. So I would like to read it and let's see. So, whereas during the month of May 2025, our city recognizes the history and achievements, tradition of leadership, resilience, and courage shown by our AANHPI Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islander community. And whereas Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders are the second largest ethnic group in the city of Brisbane at 32%, and the fastest growing racial group in the United States. And whereas according to the Federal Asian Pacific American Council, FAPAC, the theme for AANHPI Heritage Month 2025 is a legacy of leadership and resilience. Throughout history, AANHPIs have transformed adversity into opportunities for public service, efficiency, and innovations, resulting in lasting change that resonates beyond our community and has positively impacted our world. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Brisbane, hereby recognizes May 2025 as Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in the City of Brisbane. We call upon all community members to learn more about the history of Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders to observe this month supporting local programs and activities. And so, Ingrid, do we have someone representing tonight? And
Mr. Mayor, joining us to accept the proclamation is Christian Bustos, former IDEA Committee member and Executive Director of Lyrical Opposition. Within the arts community, he's known as Cross Allen. He founded and works with the arts nonprofit Lyrical Opposition based in Brisbane. He also serves as a spoken word poet and graphic designer. Cross is the executive producer for the documentary and short films for Lyrical Opposition's re-entrification film series.
great, come on up, Christian. Yeah, thank you for accepting the proclamation. Would you like to say a few words?
Yes. As a Asian American founder and a business owner here in Brisbane, we are honored. I'm honored to honored to receive the proclamation. It's been great coming here from San Francisco and Brisbane. We love it here in Brisbane, and love that you're honoring Asian Americans and representing us here and taking the time and for the month for giving keeping it short. Thanks again for the proclamation, and on behalf of the Asian American delegation, we receive the proclamation.
Great, thank you for being here tonight. And why don't you come on up? I'll give you the proclamation, and we can do a little photo op. So there is that. Hey, thanks, Christian. I appreciate you being here, man. Take it easy.
Mayor Lentz, if you don't mind, Christian, why don't you give a plug for your event?
Yes. We are celebrating our 10-year anniversary as a nonprofit here in Brisbane at hopefully the Mission Blue Center that is about to get voted for later today, I think. So hopefully that date gets approved. And if so, yes, that is the next event. And we do have an open mic on April 26th, which is this month at 99 Leland over there in Visitation Valley. So yes, we are a San Francisco and Brisbane organization. Yes, June 28th at Mission Blue Center is a 10-year anniversary for Lyrical Opposition. It will have spoken word artists, short films, family friendly, all for the community, and here in Brisbane, California.
Thanks, Christian.
Great. Thank you, Christian. All right, so we're moving on to oral communication number one. This is an opportunity for someone from the public to bring up an item that's not on tonight's agenda. And I do have one slip from Kim Folian.
Good evening, Mayor Lentz, members of the City Council. I'm here to express my concern with OSEC member Michelle Salmon's comments in the Brisbane residents Facebook group regarding the quarry redevelopment project and the
Excuse me,
city's...
Ms.
Oh,
Foley,
can we
could
go-
you speak up a little
Yeah.
bit? It's hard to hear you.
Okay, do
better.
you want me to start over?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm here to express my concern with OSEC member Michelle Salmon's comments in the Brisbane residents Facebook group regarding the quarry redevelopment project and the city's draft EIR. Her comments show prejudice and in some cases are not factual per the draft EIR. Since the City Council requested input on this project and EIR from city committees such as OSEC, where Michelle is currently the chair, this is the reason for my concern. Michelle has posted several times that the proposed use will be a 24/7 operation, whereas the draft EIR states the hours as being 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week. Additionally, per the draft EIR, to go outside of those hours, approval by the Planning Commission would be required. Yesterday, Michelle posted that the city's draft EIR is full of BS data, and in response to a resident asking if the April 23rd quarry redevelopment open house was being run by the developer, Michelle responded, yes, they want to charm you into accepting a development that will bring misery to Brisbane. Recently, when my husband was walking our dog, he ran into one of our friends, also a Brisbane resident. They got to talking about the quarry redevelopment, and our friend thought that the proposal from the developer was a 24/7 operation and that the EIR was done by the developer. The reason I'm telling you about this encounter is that residents are being influenced to reject this redevelopment based on misinformation or omission of information that provides relevant context. And this is by a City Council appointed city committee member asked by the City Council to weigh in on this project. This committee member is clearly prejudiced against this development project and is falsely claiming the data in the draft EIR by the city is BS data. Maybe the community development director would like to correct me. I don't know. I just don't think this reflects well on you or is helpful to you as this project is before you for approval. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Kim. All right, anyone else out in the audience? Anyone online, Ingrid? Doesn't appear to be anyone raising their hand. So, all right. So we'll move on to the consent calendar, items C through J. Does anyone want to remove one of the items for further discussion? If not, I will accept a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'd like to remove item C, the city council meetings of minutes of April 3rd. And I would also like to pull item J, the ordinance to adopt the second reading of zoning text amendment 2024 RZ2.
Okay, would you then be inclined to make a motion for the other items?
Yes, with that, I'd make a motion to approve item D through I.
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, item C, Terry?
Item C, I think the city wanted to make a correction on the minutes. Can we get that information, or does the city want to pull it for reconsideration at a later time?
Through the chair, I have draft text I can run by you. This would be to replace the third bullet item in the during council discussion section.
Okay,
And-
so that would be on the,
Page
on page
3.
7 of our agenda?
I'm not sure Ingrid, if you could help me on the agenda number. It's page 3 of the minutes, at the top of the minutes.
Okay. Is it made adjustments to the zoning? Is that the third bullet point you're talking about, Ken?
Correct.
Okay.
And so that text, we would just replace it with not provide a parking exemption, not provide a parking exemption for developments of 3 to 10 units, where SB 478 provides a higher FAR than the current district standard of 0.72.
I'm not quite sure how that would be read in. I'd rather see it in print and not have that.
That's fine. We can bring it to the next meeting.
We're happy to bring it back. Thank you.
Okay. So then item J, Terry?
It is on the same lines because the staff report minutes were incorrect as far as what I could tell was the meaning of the discussion. I wanted to follow through and make sure that on the FAR, the floor area ratio, that we were not on the between 8 and 10 units, we were not going above the state mandated limit.
That is correct. The state mandated limit is 1.25 in that development range. And
Okay.
it's 1.0 for 3 to 7 units.
Okay. And so the other items that were discussed were properly documented and removed from the, adjusted in that text. It's just between the red line and the second red line and all that. I wanted to make sure that what we had talked about at that meeting was actually represented in this ordinance.
Yes, correct.
And do I need to get a second opinion on this? Are you nodding your head yes, or are you giving me a second opinion? That
No,
those
no,
have
I'm
been-
nodding yes, we'll bring it back as we've said.
No, that's on the agenda, but on the item itself, waiving the second reading, do we need to adjust the text at all in the actual ordinance itself?
We do not.
We do not. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, is that satisfactory to you, Terry?
I believe so.
Okay.
It better be.
Okay. Do any other council members have questions in regards to this item? Okay, if not, then Terry, if you wouldn't mind making the motion, please.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve item J on the consent. Oh,
And no, is this a consent item?
I don't know, since we were discussing it, if then we had to.
okay. I'll make a motion to approve item J.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great, thank you. All right, now moving on to public hearing. Zoning text amendment 2025-RZ-01. Consider introduction of ordinance to update the city's density bonus and inclusionary housing ordinance. Staff report, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. Can you hear me okay?
I,
A little bit louder.
not really.
I have to get really close. Okay. So thank you. Thank you, Ingrid. So the draft ordinance before you tonight would modify the city's inclusionary housing and density bonus ordinance to comply with current state law and the city's housing element. The draft ordinance was recommended by the Planning Commission at a public hearing on February 27th. It was also reviewed by the City Council's Housing Subcommittee in March. The subcommittee did recommend revisions to the ordinance, which are shown in track changes to the draft ordinance text. Before we dive into the draft ordinance, we can do a brief background of the current regulations. So the current city ordinance was adopted in 2009. It establishes inclusionary requirements for housing developments of 6 or more units. So that means that any housing development of at least 6 units, including a mixed-use project, would have to provide a certain amount of units at affordable rent or sale costs to moderate and lower income households. The ordinance also establishes the city's procedures to implement the state's density bonus law program. So this state program is available for housing developments of at least 5 units. And under the program, developers that provide a minimum percentage of either affordable or special needs housing are eligible for increases in density over the maximum permitted in the city's code. They can also request incentives and concessions, waivers of development standards to make that development feasible economically and allow the development to be built to the permitted density. So again, the city's current ordinance needs to be updated. There have been many updates to state density bonus law, as well as provisions for local inclusionary housing regulations that have made our current ordinance out of date in many respects. And we've also implemented or adopted many housing element policies to modify the ordinance as well. So this is all driven by our own rules as well as state law. So the draft ordinance proposes numerous substantive revisions to the current regulations. Those are summarized in the staff report, and I'll highlight them here tonight on the slides. Where changes are required by state law or other policies or regulations, that's noted in the slide. So starting with the density bonus regulations. The draft ordinance would eliminate many of the state density bonus tables that were copied right into our local ordinance. State density bonus law is amended frequently. So we are interested in future-proofing our ordinance as much as possible. So we've replaced those with references to the government code. The draft ordinance would also create a density bonus for small projects of less than 5 units. So again, 5 units is a threshold under the state. We've created a small project density bonus. This is actually implementing a 2015 housing element program. The draft ordinance would also grant additional concessions or incentives to beyond those required by state law for projects that exceed the density bonus qualifications. That's a 2023 housing element program that we'd be implementing. The draft ordinance would also extend the term of affordability for the affordable units to in perpetuity. So presently, state density bonus law has terms of 45 years for sale and 55 years for rental. Our ordinance would make those units affordable as long as they existed. This is not required by any state law. We'd be going above and beyond what the state density bonus law requires. The draft ordinance would also require a 1-to-1 replacement of any units that were lost, any affordable units lost. So if they're either sold or rented in violation of the affordability restrictions or demolished or otherwise lost, they would have to be replaced. This is implementing a housing element program as well. And finally, the draft ordinance would allow one additional incentive or concession to projects that include family-sized units. That would be units with 3 or more bedrooms that are affordable to extremely low or extremely low income households. And that is a housing element program as well. And moving on to the inclusionary housing regulations. The draft ordinance would reduce the project size threshold from 6 units to 5. This is not required by any state law or policy. It is consistent with a handful of other cities in the peninsula and other cities in the Bay Area as well. The draft ordinance would also impose a flat 15% inclusionary requirement on projects. The current ordinance establishes basically a sliding scale, so your inclusionary requirement varies based on the size of the development under our current regulations. So this update would be a flat 15% requirement for both for sale and rental. This is partially driven by state law, so state law requires that cities conduct feasibility studies to justify an inclusionary requirement for rental of over 15%. We don't have such a feasibility study, so we can't really support a requirement for rental over 15%. There is no requirement for sale, but the recommendation is to kind of normalize and standardize the inclusionary requirement and not have significantly different requirements for rental versus for sale. So the 15% would be both rental and for sale. The draft ordinance would also adjust the household income targeting. So for rental units. So for inclusionary units for rental, they would be exclusively affordable to very low income households. Our current ordinance has a mix of low and very low. We would be targeting just very low. Again, that's not a state law or other requirement. That was a recommendation from the Planning Commission. The draft ordinance would also provide a pretty robust menu of alternatives to building units on site. This is partially driven by state law, as well as our housing element and affordable housing strategic plan. The alternatives would involve two alternatives that wouldn't require any discretionary approval, meaning the developer could just opt into it, decide to do it. That would be an in lieu fee payment for any size of rental project. State law does require that cities provide one alternative for rental projects. This is the alternative that was proposed by the Planning Commission. The other by right alternative would be for small for sale projects of 15 or fewer units. They could opt to pay an in lieu fee as well without any other approvals. Other alternatives are also outlined that would require council approval. So that would be land donation, off-site construction, several other alternatives that are listed there in the slide. These are all, again, providing more flexibility, but because they're a little more complex in nature, it seemed appropriate for discretionary council approval to be required. So that's driving that recommendation. Okay, next, similarly to the density bonus ordinance, the draft ordinance would increase or extend the affordability term of inclusionary units to in perpetuity. So any affordable unit provided, either inclusionary or density bonus ordinance, would have to be affordable in perpetuity under this draft ordinance. That actually is a housing element program requirement. So the housing element program did say we should do that for inclusionary, was silent on density bonus, but again, we want to be consistent throughout both. The draft ordinance would also require an in lieu fee for fractional inclusionary units. So when you have 15%, depending on the size of a housing project, you may have a 2.2 unit requirement. So in that case, they would have to provide 2 units and then pay a fee for the 0.2 fractional unit that we couldn't round up to the next whole integer. Again, that's not driven by state law or other policy. That's just a Planning Commission recommendation.
Does that go in the Affordable Housing Fund?
It
That
does.
0.2?
Mhm.
Okay, sorry. Just
Yeah.
a question.
It would. And lastly, the draft ordinance would modify some of the incentives. The most notable one is actually a recommendation from the Housing Subcommittee. So presently, the ordinance allows for sale developments to propose ADUs, accessory dwelling units, to meet the inclusionary requirement. The Housing Subcommittee that met in March has recommended that be eliminated so that ADUs are no longer a viable.
Could you repeat that? We're having a hard time hearing you down.
Sorry, I'm trying to get right up in there. So the Housing Subcommittee recommended in March that the for sale projects can no longer meet the inclusionary requirement by providing ADUs, accessory dwelling units. So yeah, that's something that, oh, sorry, I'm getting feedback. Is it okay?
So is that,
Okay, thanks.
I'm sorry, is that saying that ADUs could be sold as a separate unit?
So the Planning Commission, the ordinance that they reviewed and their recommendation was to modify the current ordinance. Sorry, let me start over. The current ordinance allows for sale projects to provide ADUs to meet the inclusionary requirement. That's already allowed. We do not allow presently ADUs to be sold separately from the main house. In order for ADUs to be sold separately from the main house, we would have to adopt an ordinance to allow that. That's not something the commission recommended, but in the commission recommended draft, we modified that section of the ordinance to basically acknowledge affordable ADUs that are meeting that inclusionary requirement could be rented or sold if the city chose to amend its regulations to allow ADUs to be sold. So I know that's still a little complicated, and maybe, John, if you can think of an easier way for me to explain it. At the end of the day, though, the presently recommended ordinance wouldn't even allow ADUs to be provided to meet the inclusionary requirement. And either way, ADUs also cannot be sold separately from single-family homes under current Brisbane law. We would have to change the law to allow that.
But well, I'll wait until I have questions.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Those are the significant changes. The in lieu fee, so obviously adopting the draft ordinance, we would need to adopt in lieu fees. There's also other administrative fees that we're recommending to be adopted. So the in lieu fees they're in the attachment, they're here on the screen. They're in line with those of other cities. They're based on a 2015 feasibility study the city did, updated with current CPI. So any in lieu fee payments that are made would be made into the city's low and moderate income housing fund. That fund would be used to program a variety of affordable housing policies and programs, whatever the council's pleasure would be. If the council introduces the ordinance tonight, we'll prepare a resolution to amend the master fee schedule at the next meeting. And we wanted to end with just a quick touch on local preferences. So local preferences are requirements that basically, privilege or prioritize certain target households when you're leasing or selling affordable units. So for an example, if we wanted to say any affordable unit would have to be prioritized for current or former Brisbane residents, that would be a local preference. We don't have any local preferences currently. The draft ordinance doesn't include any. We would need to study them separately. There are fair housing laws really influence how those preferences are crafted and adopted. So if council was interested in either learning more about that or pursuing a local preference policy, we'd be happy to come back with more information on that. But just wanted to make that clear that that's not part of the ordinance. So I'll stop my report there. I do want to acknowledge we have Tim Davis of San Mateo County HART. HART provides housing policy consulting services to us, and Tim was pretty instrumental in crafting this update. So he's in the Zoom and may take questions from council as well.
All right, well, thank you, Julia. Well, let's start with questions on this side. Anybody? Colleen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, great appreciation to both staff and the Planning Commission. I read the report, it's very thorough, and also our Housing Subcommittee, because I think the changes that were recommended are very well thought. I have one minor question. It says in the staff report that the requirement for the plan to include methods to verify tenant homebuyer incomes and procedures for qualifying tenant homebuyers for units.
What page is that, Colleen?
Page number 187.
Okay.
It also says page 4 of 7, attachment 5. And so I have two questions with that. I'm assuming, and it says the staff is proposing city establish income verification and qualification procedures. Who actually verifies the income is the first question.
Sure. Tim, do you feel comfortable stepping in, or do you want me to start?
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much. The setup in most cases is that the developer who first develops the building, that their marketing agent or leasing agent would do the upfront verification of income, but then would send a package to the city that then there would be a staff person who would then verify that income before allowing the unit to be leased or sold.
Okay, thank you. Second question then. If you go to page 177, also listed as page 17 of 19 of the draft. In the middle of the page, under 17.31.090, letter A, number 4. And it says procedures for qualifying tenant households and prospective purchaser households of inclusionary units, including any preferences. Even if we don't stipulate current income levels required, I didn't find anything in this draft saying that income would be part of the implementation. And I feel that should somehow be included under number 4. Just a statement that whatever guidelines in effect at the time for income verification or income qualification probably is what it would read. Just a mention, because there's nothing in here about income.
Yeah, I think we can revise that number to be more clear. I will say, I think that's exactly what that line item is getting at. It just doesn't say income.
That's what I figured. It was the
Okay.
only place I could figure where that applied. And just a very minor modification of stating, because otherwise there's nothing that says income is what qualifies you.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Frank?
I think I've got 2 questions and a statement. So my first question is on page 158, and it's under the inclusionary in lieu fee, setting the fee accounts. About the third or fourth sentence here, it says the in lieu fees would be maintained in the city's low and moderate income housing fund. Do we have something like that exists today, or would this be a new fund that we would be creating?
I know the city has a low and moderate income housing fund already. It has, and we have money in it, not a lot, but some. It's funds left over from the redevelopment agency that was dissolved in 2012, and also has some newer funds that resulted from selling land that was previously owned by the redevelopment agency. And,
So there's no additional management work to go along with that? Okay, good to know. Okay. My next question is, and I didn't see this in the document, maybe this is something that the council needs to discuss further, but the question is has Brisbane taken a position from a strategy standpoint on the amount of inclusionary housing it's looking for on the go forward? Does that make sense?
Wait, repeat that again.
Do we have a strategy or a position as a community, as a city council, on the direction we want to take on inclusionary housing? Do we want more? Do we want less? Is it an important thing? Is it a priority to us? I didn't see that in the documentation. I saw a bunch of levers we can throw, but I didn't see an actual position that the city had on that. So it's just, I think it's more of a statement than it is a question.
Yeah, and I think we could, bring that up during the council discussion.
Okay.
Because I'm assuming that we'd all say yes, so.
Okay. So we'll maybe move that over to council discussion. And then last but not least, just a question about the benchmarking exercise. I didn't see anything in the table in the document regarding local preferences. Was that a question that was asked of other communities?
we did not survey them to see if they had local preferences, but that's definitely information we could provide if council's interested.
Thank you. That's all I have.
All righty. Terry?
So, on page 156, on your staff report, in the allow additional incentive, one additional incentive or concession if the density bonus project includes family-sized target units of affordable to low to extremely low income households. Why would we add affordable units getting a density bonus instead of just targeting low and extremely low, which is what we're in very short supply of?
I'm not quite sure if I'm going to answer your question exactly, but I'm going to at least think out loud while I figure out how to answer it. So that program it's in our housing element, and the motivation is to encourage development of larger units, because that's seen as, one, it's those larger units are not frequently developed. Most new developments seem to be like 1 or 2 bedrooms. We have a need for larger family size units that are affordable. So part of our housing element analysis looks at what different, household needs are, and large family households, affordable units is one of those needs, and it's hard to meet. So the reason that's in our housing element is because we're trying to incentivize the development of such unit types. Then we don't think the market would on its own deliver them. So the incentive is, a project gets an additional incentive or concession, so some other modification of a zoning requirement that makes the development more affordable to build. And we get these units that are, again, not really being delivered by the market, that are serving a part of our population that isn't otherwise served. So I think it is targeting, and again, this is density bonus, so not inclusionary, which inclusionary is very low only, and extremely low is a subset of that. Does that help at all to kind of think through the motivation of it, or did I completely miss?
To a certain degree, it helped with the motivation for it, but I'm not sure I agree with the motivation for it, but that's for discussion.
Okay.
And then on the inclusionary housing ordinance, page 157, when we talk about in lieu fees, and you put in some dollar amounts further on where the in lieu fees are, they don't come, I don't believe, anywhere close to the dollar amount it would cost to provide that affordable unit. We can't build a unit for $264,000, I don't think. And so I'm not sure, since this isn't regulated by state law, and if it's going to cost a developer less to put an in lieu fee that we're never going to be able to monetize into an actual unit at that price, why would we be giving them the option to do an in lieu fee when what our real goal is to create affordable housing? And so, do we have an actual dollar amount of what it costs to build an affordable unit in today's market rate? And I guess my question is, are those dollar amounts enough to build a unit?
Yeah, that's a good question. And Tim, I'll defer to you to explain how the in lieu fees were derived, but I think we should also talk about the way development costs are spread out in like a mixed use development.
Certainly.
It's kind of a
certainly.
different calculation than like 100% affordable.
Yeah. So the in lieu fees are meant to kind of capture what it would cost the city to support an affordable unit being built elsewhere. And there was this, as Julia's mentioned, there was a 2015 study that gave you a number, and we're trying to update that for today using CPI. It is important that the city get a fresh look at what the actual costs are today. And that is why the city of Brisbane is participating in the 21 Elements Grand Nexus study, which is about to be launched, which will get you that new number. It is a study that is amongst a number of the San Mateo County jurisdictions. The RFP for a consultant is actually out on the street now. And so hopefully, or by the end of the year, maybe early 2026, we will have a new number. And at that point, I'm sure Julia would come back to the council to revise the number to make sure that it is in line with today's costs.
Okay, I'll save the rest of that thought for when we go into discussion. And then as a question on the acknowledging that ADUs provided for sale developments may be able to be sold if the city amends its ADU, and this might be a question for legal. And I'm not sure if we have legal in the meeting tonight. I don't see them. Ah, there we go. By putting this into our ordinance, isn't that insinuating that that is an option that we would be moving forward with when we're writing it into our regulations? That an ADU in the future may have the possibility of being sold?
Until it's the policy, actual policy of the city, I would want to change that wording, or at least footnote it. I don't think we can footnote it in the code, however, so I would want to probably to pull back a sentence until we could clarify it.
Can I just clarify? The draft ordinance before the council tonight does not include that provision at all. In fact, it totally eliminates ADUs from being provided in any shape or form to meet the inclusionary requirement.
It's striked out, isn't it? in the
That's
It's
what was
strict,
hard.
it's struck out. Yeah.
Well, that's not in the staff report.
So that's not what I saw. Okay,
Which staff?
can you,
It might,
I'll just-
are you looking at the planning commission report from the 27th?
I'm looking at page 157.
do you, can you
Page
just,
3 of 6 of the staff report.
Oh my gosh. You are completely right. That should have been taken out. I'm so sorry. No, she's completely right. It's on page 3 of 6. That is incorrect.
Second
I
to
did
last
not
box.
update, yeah, I did not update that. I'm so sorry for not catching that. And very good catch. Thank you, Mayor. I will note, though, again, the ordinance itself has that section completely struck out. Sorry. There's the confusion there. My confusion.
That's why we have meetings, right? To catch these things.
That's why we ask questions.
Uh-huh.
At this point, those are the only questions I have for staff.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Oh, yeah.
before we go to
Absolutely.
discussion, may I ask one more question?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh, not a
When we
Oh, I don't have any.
just brought up in lieu fees, are those required, or do we have the option to say there are no in lieu fees? The units must be built as part of a project. That seems like that would be an imperative of the city, with the desire,
Yeah.
as Councilmember O'Connell brought up, that we don't want people avoiding building these units. We want them built.
Yeah, so there's no requirement to have any alternatives for like a for sale development at all. There's nothing in the state law. However, we did have for rental, the state does require at least one alternative. They don't dictate what kind of alternative that is. There's a lot of alternatives. There's land dedication, offsite construction, basically everything we enumerated, or that's enumerated in the draft ordinance, is potentially a feasible option for rental developments. The commission and, staff's consideration, we identified in lieu fees as the alternative for rental and recommended that alternative be available to for sale as well, in addition to many others. But no, there's no legal requirement that an in lieu fee specifically be provided as an alternative. We do have to provide an alternative for rental.
Okay, so we could actually designate a different alternative
You could.
than in lieu fees.
But I think you would need to at least have some in lieu fee for those non-whole number scenario.
We'd be
Like,
kind of leaving money on the table, I
Yeah,
think, if we didn't,
you would
for at
need
least
something to
fractional
account
units.
for that.
Unless you round up.
Sure, if we wanted to have that policy.
Although that may just make a project infeasible.
Infeasible, yeah. Yeah.
Well, but the alternative is you build projects that are market rate, as we keep seeing, and we're never addressing
No,
the
no,
low and very low.
that's not what I'm talking about.
Let's stick to those
I'm
questions.
saying like the 15%.
Yeah, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Yeah.
So, any more questions, Colleen?
No,
And
thank you.
Madison, you said that you didn't have any, or did you?
I mean, we
some come
looked
up?
over all this already.
Yes. Yeah, I just have one question, and I kind of answered it as I dove deeper into the packet, but, going from 6 units to 5 units as the the minimum amount that would kick in doing an affordable unit or an in lieu fee. So I saw that quite a few cities have 5. I'm just kind of curious, like, what the discussion was with staff and the planning commission in regards to dropping it a unit, because it just seemed that if the lower you go, the harder it might be for a developer to actually pencil out and do any housing. So curious about that.
Sure. So, yeah, as you noted, and is shown in the benchmarking of other cities, 5 units is not uncommon as a threshold throughout the peninsula. And then, also when it comes to development feasibility, I mean, I think between 5 or 6 units, I can't tell you exactly how much less feasible that requirement may be from a 5 unit versus a 6. But, those projects could potentially be eligible for a density bonus under state law, which would allow for incentives or concessions that are directly related to modifications to make the development more affordable for the developer. So I don't think that we have any evidence that a 5 unit threshold makes development infeasible. And it also, again, like for any project, would open the door for them exercising density bonus provisions to reduce the cost of development.
Okay, all right. Because I thought it was interesting that you had Belmont at 25 units. Yeah, and then others around 10. So, well, thank you for that. All right, so this is a public hearing. So let's open it up to the public. Is there anyone out in the audience who has a burning question on this subject matter? All right, no one's raising a hand. I don't have any slips. Ingrid, do we have anyone online who would like to make a comment or provide some input?
I see no hands raised at this time.
Okay, then I'll take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. So, Madison, Colin, you guys for having a nice chat. You guys want to start?
Oh, I was just clarifying, like, if you need to have 15% and that works out to 2.2 units, then you should have an in lieu fee to compensate for that 0.2. They can't construct 0.2 of a unit, but they should still be paying something for that missing amount. So then they could contribute that in lieu fee to the affordable housing. That's all it was saying. I would like for us to explore a local preference. I think that's incredibly important. And I don't think it really came up in our subcommittee meeting, but I think both of us would have said that we would have liked to see, a preference for current Brisbane residents to have access to low-income units first.
Yes.
And
I see everyone nodding on that.
I certainly agree with that, and I think that we should look at that on a broader spectrum in our own low-income senior housing, et cetera,
correct.
that really has not been addressed properly.
I agree. And then with respect to the incentive or concession, if you have a family size target unit, I mean, I think that it is really important for us to try to inspire some larger affordable housing units for people with families, and they're so few and far between, especially for low and very low. I mean, that's like a needle in a haystack trying to find one of those. And so I would be willing to allow a concession if it were to yield a bigger affordable unit. So
To piggyback on that, what are these concessions?
So incentives and concessions are basically modifications to the zoning requirements that would result in cost savings. I thought I might have had some on a slide, but parking, that could be one of them. So, reducing parking on site could be a concession. Building parking is often pretty expensive. Potentially like lot coverage, or it's some modification of a zoning standard that the developer says this will actually result in real reductions in cost that will make this development feasible.
Could that be something that we, like, that the planning commission or the council would review on a case-by-case basis? Or is it just saying like, yeah, we'll give you something if you do this? Or is it just saying that there's
Like,
a
could we make
possibility?
that incentive or concession like something that council would approve versus just a kind of by right?
Yeah, like on a case-by-case basis, if like it would, you know, saying if you would like to build one of these units, the council may consider giving you, you know, an incentive or a concession, but it's not a guarantee.
If I may, Mr. Mayor?
Let me just see if Julia's going to come back with a response. real
Well, but I have part of her answer right here. In the staff report, going back to the Planning Commission agenda from February 2025, density bonus program allows housing developers to achieve greater residential densities that would otherwise be allowed, diverge from other zoning requirements such as, here's your answer, height or parking.
Well, I don't know if that is my answer, really is the answer. It's more like,
So,
do we have
yeah,
the
Julia,
leeway?
You got a response,
So-
please.
Just John and I were kind of chatting. So this is coming out of our housing element. It's our own program. My
already there.
feeling is that we could make it subject to discretionary approval by council. So that's not just a given. They can opt and choose whatever. I think that that's okay, but we'll probably want to double check with legal. Yeah. And I don't know if Tom's prepared right now to answer that or if we'll have to come back, but.
Lastly, with respect to 6 to 5, I mean, I think that we're just so small and we're very built out, right? And so I think that I would really like for us to encourage as many affordable units as we can. And I think it's when you require it for, say, a 5-unit building, it's more likely that we will have one of those than a 6-unit or higher. And so that was my thought. I know this came up in a discussion. Just 6 seems like it would have to be the perfect lot to get 6, but 5, you know, there might be more options. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think 5 makes sense. That's it.
All righty. Terry?
So to piggyback on that, not on the 6 to 5, because I'm in agreement with reducing it to 5. Back to the allowing one additional concession. I'm a little more comfortable with it being that we've added it, that it's a may, not a given, especially when height is included.
Yeah.
And possibly floor area ratio and a whole bunch of other things because it's really not spelled out here. But I'd still like to see it on low to extremely low because affordable really isn't. I mean, affordable is people making $120,000 a year. And that's not really the population we're trying to serve. So even putting in it would have to come before another body, whether that's us or the planning commission or someone, you know, to make sure that it's within line. I'd rather have it just on the low to extremely low because we can't get anybody to build any of those. So why give concessions to affordable when we really need to be giving the concessions to the low and extremely low?
Can I ask a clarifying question? The ordinance does specify low to extremely low income households. Are you thinking very low? to extremely low. So low-income households is 80% AMI roughly, or 80% of the area median income. Very low is like 50-ish, and extremely low is 30. So the wording in the draft ordinance is, family size units that are dedicated for use by low to extremely low income households. Are you
Okay,
wanting
well-
us to change it to very low?
No, I'm,
Okay.
in the staff report, it says affordable.
Oh,
So maybe the staff report's wrong again.
it says affordable to low to extremely low.
Yeah, affordable too, meaning those household income levels can afford it. Affordable,
It's
would
not
it
affordable
represent
housing, it is low to extremely low. And
That's
the word
correct.
affordable
In-
could be just,
it means that they could afford it. It's not trying to represent like an
it's
income
how
level.
it's written and how I'm interpreting it rather than how the ordinance is written.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Affordable to the low and extremely low people.
Yeah. So everyone's good with the wording as is? Okay, I see the nods. All right,
Well,
that's good.
I just was reading the staff report with or without a comma when surrounded in parentheses.
Yeah,
No, thank you for clarifying that. So you're comfortable with low to extremely low income households being targeted by that
But it would
provision?
need to be discretionary also,
If it was discretionary. Okay, understood.
in my opinion, but I don't know about everybody else's.
Yeah, no, I think if that works to move this forward, I think that's okay.
And then, again, I know we're coming back later with information on, adjusting what a unit would cost to be built, and what numbers to put in, whether we take out the wording for in lieu for whole units, or just for the portion, the 0.2 or 0.6 of a unit that would be required. But perhaps we can tie that to whatever number we get for I would rather not see them be able to opt out of a unit.
Can I ask
In
a
whole.
question? Can I ask a question? Did you say that we have to provide an alternative? So what's an alternative besides an in lieu?
Well, the ordinance has all of the other alternatives that we could really think of that would be feasible. So donation of land, the land would have to be of sufficient size to accommodate the number of units that, so say they needed to provide 5 inclusionary units and they wanted to provide land instead to develop those units on and develop only market rate units on their property. So yeah, land donation, conversion of market rate units. So if the developer wanted to say, okay, my requirement is 3 units, well, instead of building them in my project, I'm going to acquire 3 of them in the city of Brisbane, convert them to deed restricted affordable housing, and meet the requirement that way.
They had another property or something?
Yeah, however they would,
Any property.
Okay.
I mean, they'd have to acquire a property.
Yeah, no, that's
Um,
seems like a very steep climb. I mean, I know there's alternatives, but those alternatives don't seem very feasiable.
That's what I.
And that's
yeah.
why the in lieu fee is the most feasible, and that's why most cities do it. And I'll just
Depending on
I mean,
the fee.
Yeah, right. And I looked at what the other cities do, and I had the same question. I'm looking at the amount. And I was like, that doesn't seem right. That amount, Terry, you're correct. It's too low. But then you look at the other cities. At least that's how I felt about it. And then when I look at the other cities, and it seems like we have one of the highest. And I know there's some formulas here and hard to maybe actually figure it out. But I'm glad that they're, through 21 Elements, they're going to update and give us an accurate amount that seems practical. Because in the end, you do want to build units overall. And you don't want to just have a burden that then doesn't allow it to pencil out. But we want it to be fair too. So, but we're not the experts. But the folks that are going to be deciding at the county level are, and it makes sense to put our trust in what eventually comes out.
Mr.
for
Mayor,
now.
I have a comment.
Sure.
Considering I just saw an article last week about the price to construct a house perhaps doubling in the next year. How often are they going to update these in lieu fees? In which case, I would much rather, as Councilmember O'Connell suggested, that we require them to build it, and as Councilmember Davis had suggested, perhaps we take the percentage that is the odd amount and go with an in lieu fee because it won't be as large. I think we're going to be missing the boat if we put in specific numbers now, and in 6 months we might go, we were crazy. It's way past that. And then what do we accomplish in terms of really building anything?
But don't we need an alternative, though? I mean, that's a requirement.
If you were going to eliminate the in lieu fee for rental, you'd have to come up with another alternative.
Yeah, right? And so we need, if we're going to do an alternative, it should be feasible, right? We got to do it. I mean, we have to have an alternative. Doesn't mean it has to be in lieu fees, but if we're going to have, but because we have to, we should put something out there that makes sense.
Maybe it's a piece of property or land. And then it will be subject to whatever the market rate is at the time. Whereas if we put a number in, we're locking into a number. Instead of land or another housing unit, piece of property will be at whatever the current prevailing rate is.
But what if the developer can't provide the piece of land? Or one of the, I mean, then what do you do? Then like,
So-
sorry, you can't move forward. You got to build the unit, and that might not. What if that then makes that particular project infeasible, right? And then we don't have any housing. We don't want that.
Yeah.
So
I mean, 5 units is better than no units, or 6 units or 5 units, excuse me. That that might be market rate, and getting money that we could eventually use for affordable housing seems better than nothing.
well, I don't think we should have the nothing option necessarily.
Yeah.
But I do think that putting in numbers that would not build a unit, even if we were granting every bonus density and height adjustment and FAR in the book. But if there is a number in this, and maybe we have to have one as of today or whenever this ordinance passes, we tie that number to the building index or the CPI
There you
or
go.
something where it raises,
Now you're
on the
talking.
first of the year, it raises by whatever the current building cost. I'm not sure CPI is going to reflect that because it takes in so many other things. And, cost of building is going up at a tremendous rate. So, it's something that even though the cost of building is going up tremendously, also is the value of the housing. So any developer that's taking that risk is taking that risk and should be paying us for the same amount of in lieu that they should be paying us. So I'm not sure how you do that, but it certainly needs to be tied to a CPI of some sort.
Can you put up those fees again, just so I can see them? So, okay. I think the other way to think about this, it's maybe slightly bit confusing, but I got down this rabbit hole a couple weeks ago looking at buying apartment buildings. And somehow I'm on some email list, and they send me all these apartment buildings in the East Bay, in Oakland, in Berkeley. And so I'm like, oh, how much is it? And it's so interesting because they'll break it down once you start looking at apartment buildings. They break things down so differently than if you're just looking at a house. And they say, what's the price per unit? And in Oakland, great parts of Oakland, you're seeing, like 150,000 a unit, essentially. So you're buying, and it might be, 10 units or whatever. They're not that much. But I was just looking at one in my phone, and it's 6 blocks away from Cal Berkeley, 12-unit apartment building, and it's 3.6 million. So each unit is equivalent to $300,000. And while, yeah, you're not gonna just spring up an affordable ADU somewhere maybe for that price, when you're thinking about multi-family housing, it's not they don't price it like, you don't price it how much each unit is. Like, oh, you would think that if you were just like buying a condo, it might be 650,000, but you're looking at the whole building, you're getting 12 units for 300,000 a piece essentially. So the way that this actually works in the real world when you're looking at big multifamily buildings is different than if you're thinking about it like a condo, where the price of that, you're owning that one piece and it's, 700,000 for a unit of a similar size. So like this is, we're talking about rentals here, and those are what the numbers kind of shake out to be in the real world right now, whether it's affordable or not affordable. I haven't dug deep into what the ratios are, but 300,000 doesn't seem that off.
That's so interesting that you bring that up, Madison, because former days in Chicago, right? So my developer built a 34-unit building from the ground up. It was a bowling alley. They knocked it down. He did it for around $3 million. I know that's Chicago dollars. We're talking about 2,000 here. But at the same time, he was able to move those units for $300,000 each. So the shared service of the walls and the structure and the electricity and all that, that does get spread among the units. And so when we're looking at in lieu fees here, you could probably build a condo, one single condo, for nearly $400,000, but that would be part of a larger structure. So I think you're raising a good point here.
We can't think of it as like, oh, if you give us 300,000, I'm not going to be able to then go and build that unit for 300,000. Well,
Correct.
yeah, you only can do that if you're building it in the full development, and maybe that's why you don't even have that as an option. But it's just something to think to consider.
It's a way to frame it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it is actually really the proper way to frame it, because this is what we're looking at from the developer's perspective.
Yeah.
So, in the staff report, it does say that if we wanted to have more of an incentive to build the unit instead of getting the in lieu fee, we could increase the in lieu fee. Right? That's in the staff report, and that's something that we can do. But based upon what Madison has just said, it sounds like what we're asking is pretty fair. But we do know that we're going to get updated numbers from 21 Elements. And so if the council is comfortable keeping these numbers, seeing what then comes in from 21 Elements, we update that, and then do what Terry has recommended, where we tie it to something so that it increases over time. It doesn't get locked in, which I know is a concern that you have, Colleen.
Yep.
How quickly are we getting that information?
So that in lieu fee calibration, we're expecting probably early next year.
So it's not.
They just
like,
went to RFP like
It's not
this month.
imminent. It's interesting, but when you're looking at, when you're looking at real estate values of someone saying you can buy this 10-unit building for $3 million, that building may need renovation. That building may have tenants, if it's in a rent-controlled area where it has tenants that are paying $300 a month. It could have, all sorts of issues going on. I mean, a friend of mine's thinking of selling his 5-unit building in Bernal Heights. And it's only worth about $2 million. And it's a beautiful old Victorian 5-unit building, but it needs a bunch of stuff. So you can't just take, it's like looking at the building on Visitation that went into receivership. that building didn't sell for market value. It wasn't in a rentable condition at that moment, or at least not a good rentable condition. And so, we can't really go in looking at it that, oh, well, we could buy this 20-year-old building or 30-year-old building for X amount of money, and that we could expect to get so much back on our return like you're looking at it a business. Because businesses, when they're buying rental buildings, they're looking at all sorts of things and rapid depreciation and writing off the taxes and doing all sorts of creative things that really change what's feasible and not feasible. The same thing that builders are doing when they're building on spec. They're taking a lot of different aspects into what makes something a pencil out or not pencil out. And I don't think it's our job to figure out that for them or anybody else, unless you're running your own project to build yourself a home. But, I think that we do need to make sure that we do everything we can that these units get built rather than an in lieu fee.
Absolutely.
I mean, they
absolutely.
just have to be that way. So,
Julia, I have a question for you. When's the last time we built a multi-unit housing build structure that the inclusionary housing ordinance was, kicked in?
I believe the only project we've applied the ordinance to is the One San Bruno mixed use.
That was about 18 years ago, something like that, right? So it isn't like, they're knocking on our door, and it isn't like we're going to give away the house anytime soon. So we should pass something. And then if it takes a year, chances are, we're probably not going to have anything before us anyways. So, but at least we'll put in motion something that is fair and that eventually will be updated with numbers that I think are more realistic, that we can then hang our hat on because they were vetted by folks who this is what they do.
I think the alternatives, right, like the donation of land, the conversion of market rate, those alternatives feel less realistic, which could then do what you're thinking and make them just build the units, which is the outcome you want. But I think you also run the risk of no units at all. And is that something, do we take a position where we say we'd rather have no units, even if they're at market rate, because there's no affordable? Or do you say, well, we want to move the needle and have more housing in general, and so having a project is a good thing, and if we then have to, figure out the affordable housing piece ourselves, I don't know. I think there's you could look
Councilperson
at it both
Davis,
ways.
you just did a great job at clarifying my extremely poorly worded statement of earlier. And that was, the city council may adjust these fees to incentivize particular outcomes, and that's exactly it. We need to strike that balance, and it's going to be a fine line
Make them
to walk.
high.
Yeah.
and also one of the things that, you asked, I thought that what your question was referring to, as far as like goals and strategy, was meeting our state mandated housing element, which, is state mandated, and, God knows we can't go out and build it. Nobody's giving us hammer and nails to go out and actually build it because we're not in that business. It's like we're not taking care of the coyote problem. But anyway, so I think that has to be our first goal, is meeting our housing element, and what the state mandated numbers are on RENA numbers, which, is a target that is so high up off the ground that, it's almost impossible to reach. And from there, we certainly want to have a mix of housing and it be inclusionary, but getting there's the hard part.
It always is, and it's hard for everybody. but all we can do is our best, but we got to have the tools in place. And so I know that we made some changes. Do we feel comfortable that we can move this forward with the changes that we did make and be fine with the in lieu fee as it is right now?
What's an in lieu fee that makes you feel comfortable?
Oh, I don't know what it actually costs if we, when you look at an in lieu fee, it's not just the cost to build that unit, it's the cost of the land it sits on and everything else. And I have no idea. I'm not in that business. I just think that we shouldn't just have a blanket fee that we don't know if it really covers anything, and have it not be tied to a CPI at least. And I think that right now that we could easily, even though we're going to get updated numbers on what it costs to build a unit, and what other cities are doing, and frankly, what other cities are doing isn't my biggest driver. But I think that if we do have a number in here, that they should be tied to a CPI increase based on a yearly basis at the least. You can put that in,
Do that tonight.
we could do
Okay.
that
All
tonight
right.
and put it on the CPI or the local CPI or however legal or financial is comfortable doing that. But, I hate to just put in this number that isn't going to get us anywhere. And granted, if we take that, let's say we have 10 projects that have 5+ units that aren't going to build their one unit. And so we'd get 3.78 million, let's say, from those 10 projects. That might buy the land to put 10 projects on, wouldn't build the projects. We'd be lucky if 3.7 million paid to buy enough land to put 10 units on.
Yeah.
I don't think that even is a drop in the bucket. That's not even building the unit. That's just the land to put it on. And so, we're tying this to an irrational number on what it really costs to build things. Now, if the city donates the land, because we have that whatever millions of dollars to donate the land, maybe somebody could build 10 units for 3.78 million, probably. But that's not including the land costs.
I think it's because how you're thinking of it is what does it cost to go out and construct that unit versus what does that unit cost when it's within a project.
Yeah.
And so if it's a 5-unit project, right, conceivably that unit is worth $378,000. If it's 5 to 10, do you see then it adjusts, but that's why the thinking of, oh, is this enough to construct versus what is that unit worth within the project are two different ways
I know,
to
but
analyze.
you have to still look at it because, if we had 5 projects that were 10 units, we'd only be getting $1 million. And here, 5 units that are 5 units, we'd be getting 3.7 million.
I have a question for staff. So, and I see we're just asked tonight to just to introduce and give direction.
Correct.
And we're not required to make any motions tonight just to give direction, or
No.
we are required to make a motion tonight.
We're asking you to introduce the ordinance. That would establish an in lieu fee as an option. We would come back with a separate resolution to adopt the fee amount at a separate meeting. So you would not be adopting a fee amount tonight, one way or the other.
Okay.
Through the chair, I don't know if this is helpful for the previous conversation, the way that we tend to think about the monies that a city has related to housing opportunities, it's leverage opportunities. So they can be sliced and diced in so many different ways. It can be a component of a purchase. It can be a component of a project. So they get tailored in that fashion. So I just wanted to add some color.
Okay. All right. So just to help us to move along. So it seems like we were good. It seems like everyone's good with going from 6 to 5 units. And I don't know if there was anything else in the document that we wanted to alter that was.
Local preference.
Oh, the local, yes, so that would come back before us, local preference. And then coming up with some kind of CPI that is attached to a to-be-determined impact fee or in lieu fee.
And additional incentive for large family size units by, at council discretion.
Would be at council.
That's what I was just
discretion.
gonna add. Thank you.
Chamber,
Okay.
or our planning discretion.
But we're going to leave in the, allowing people to do in lieu of having affordable units in the project by paying us off.
Well, I haven't heard of an alternative that makes
That makes
more sense.
Yeah.
What I only heard too, is there a place in that staff report where it lists all the other options? Because this is a big report.
Sure. It's in the table, and I apologize, my version doesn't have the numbering you do. But in the table, inclusionary housing ordinance with a green header, the incentive, or alternatives, excuse me, are listed in that table.
What page is that?
I don't have that.
We don't have the full packet in front of us. We're working off individual components.
It's page 3 of
Page-
6.
Oh,
Page
the one
3
right-
of
the
the
staff
staff.
The main
report.
one. Got it.
Yeah, that helps.
Yeah, so in that table, inclusionary
Yeah,
housing
right.
ordinance.
You're
it's-
right. Right
yeah.
there in the middle.
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Offsite construction, land donation, conversion of market rate. Funding affordable or special needs housing project. Or in lieu fee.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I'm taking in everything everyone's saying, and thank you to all my colleagues for all your different points. I think there's another way to look at this, maybe we haven't touched upon. I understand Councilmember O'Connell saying we want the units built. I understand the discussion of the dollar amounts. The bottom line is, we want someone to build it, whether it's us or them. And it's going to be difficult to find developers who want to build because the interest rates are high, the materials are going sky high, and a lot of projects that are approved in other cities are not being built. They've got permits and they're not building because they can't afford the labor cost and they can't afford the materials and the financing of the projects. So I think we could go through a lot of push and shove about the dollar amounts, but if someone's willing to build it, I'm almost now willing, listening to all of you, to go with what Cliff and Madison have been saying of, even if it's not enough, do we want to be developers and just have our in lieu fees build up? We want someone to build it. And we have RENA allocations in the very low, and what's the bottom one? The bottom 2 tiers.
Really low.
They're not getting built. And we've gone for several years on this where it's like pulling teeth. Nobody wants to build that stuff. And Councilmember Kern, you asked about inclusionary housing. I was on the Planning Commission in 2018, and part of this discussion came up because we asked staff, how can we get people to build more of these low-income units? Looking at other cities, we're doing inclusionary ordinances, and we said, could we look at it? And they were kind enough to put all that together. And we did have public hearings, so we solicited the public, not that they all showed up, but nonetheless, we took in a lot of different aspects of this to incentivize it because it's just not getting built. So I think the starting point with this, we can pick it apart, but even if we don't get enough in lieu fees, I'm now of the opinion we need to incentivize them to come to Brisbane instead of South City or San Mateo or Redwood City and build their units. And part of this is, how many lots do we have that can handle 10 units? Very few. So we're looking at the 5 units. And so we should try to do what we can as a council to incentivize that. Right there, that's our target, because those are the lots we have.
I agree. Thank you very much for stating.
Thank all of you, because you had some great
saying that.
points.
All right. So in the interest of time, are we good with just leaving that in lieu number that was recommended by Planning Commission, but we'll tie it to some kind of CP?
We're not voting on the number.
I know we're not. I'm not saying we're just giving direction to staff, and staff needs direction. And as long as we're all in agreement, then we can move on. So,
I
all
am.
right, cool. Thank you.
Minimum
Thank you.
viable product.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. All right.
You're going to call for a vote?
We don't need to vote. We just have to.
Yes,
get
we do.
Oh, we do
Yeah,
need
it's
to do
an
the vote.
ordinance.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Oh.
So, all right. I was confused. I thought you were nodding like just give you direction. So, okay. So, I will take a motion in a second.
I'll make a motion to approve with the text, with the amendments that we've made, zoning text amendment 2025 RZ01 with the necessary corrections.
So moved. I mean, second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Now we can move on to new business. Item L, approved 2025 council priority staff report, please.
Thank you, Mayor Lentz, members of the council. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. On March 22nd, the council met in special session to discuss the priorities for fiscal year 25-26. And at that special meeting, the council recommended three priorities related to the city's facilities, the city's fiscal health, and volunteerism. This staff report tonight is intended to provide the council with the opportunity to essentially wordsmith what I prepared tonight to make sure that we're capturing exactly what you'd like to see in priorities. And also, if there are any particular projects that you have considered in the last month or during the time we had the meeting on the 22nd that you'd like to be included as part of the budget proposals that we're preparing right now, this would be an appropriate time to have that conversation. Thank you.
All right. So just to open it up to to council questions, and probably then just go right into discussion, really.
Well, there's really no question. I think that the three priorities basically are, I shouldn't say no-brainers, but they are certainly very broad, and I think that's good as far as priorities. I don't think it really got down into the nuts and bolts, but it wasn't what it was meant to do. And I don't think the language really changes, no matter how much you pretty it up.
Okay, so in the discussion, it says if there are specific projects that the council would like to discuss for inclusion in the fiscal year 2025-2026 budget, it would be appropriate to have that discussion under this agenda item. So,
And if it's helpful, I can give some additional clarification. So as the council knows, we're in the midst of the budget development for next year. So in the next week or two, I'm going to be reviewing each department's budget proposals. They're aware, obviously, of the council's priorities. This year, given the time frame that we have, it's likely not possible to insert into the budget process every single thing the council wants to do at this point. So the way that I would suggest that we treat the priorities is that it's direction to staff over the course of the next year to bring forward those projects, ideas, and otherwise that would fulfill the council's priority desires. But with the caveat that if there are particular projects that you'd like to think of, that you are aware of tonight, that it would be a good time to share those. Does that help? Hopefully.
sure. No, I think so. I mean, you can have a priority. You say, hey, I'd like for something, but it might not be feasible at this time too. So, but it gives direction. Is that what, kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm looking to Councilmember O'Connell. How can I help clarify?
You see the look of consternation on my face.
You.
We had a priority setting session, and the three items that the discussion, 3 points, I think those are pretty much tap into what we were saying.
Okay.
I'm not sure that under council priorities, this is the time to be bringing in budget requests, even though that is mentioned in the staff documentation, that now would be the time to say, gee, I'd like a new swimming pool, or whatever it is that we would be interested in seeing addressed in the upcoming budget. So that's just where I was giving the look of, really?
Well, the reason I had suggested it as an opportunity is, when we bring the budget forward, we only have a few weeks, 2 weeks really, to make any modifications to it based on that kind of input. So if there was any earlier
True, but
input, I'd be happy to take
I
it.
think that if we are really going to be looking at number one, which I think was everybody's number one, the fiscal health of the city, until we know what the basic bare bones budget is going to look like, we're not going to have the knowledge of how much money may or may not be available to do anything shiny and bright. And so, without having that, it's really hard to say what else the priority would be if we don't know where we are financially. We could all put in our wish list, but I'm not sure how helpful that would be at this point.
That's fair. Thank you.
Could I make a suggestion?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
We're up
you.
for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think looking at budget, and we're doing a deep dive this year, and the outcome of that with these priorities, fiscal health, we all agree, we'll have a better grasp going into next year. And in terms of suggesting projects, I think that's something that might be more appropriate later in the year for the next budget, so that maybe each subcommittee could make suggestions, and then all the suggestions compiled, and maybe later in the year or next year, we go over all the suggestions from subcommittees on projects and parse it out, because we'll have a better idea of dollar amounts and what we have and where we're headed financially.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and I can easily modify any language that comes out of tonight. So folks understand what the direction of the council is that the priorities for the year may not be reflected in next year. Priorities for next year may not be reflected in the budget, but the year will be spent developing an appropriate budget to reflect those. Got it.
Exactly.
Cool.
Madison, you got anything to say?
No.
Frank, you got anything to say? You know, when I was looking at this thing, like the first thing that I put out there was something that you had to spend money on. And to me, it's, how do we utilize the top floor of the community center, for the public good? Yeah. So, but then it's like, right, okay, that costs money. And okay, are there other things that we can do that are from this list that we're not tapping into the general fund? And so when I was like, okay, well, volunteering, Brisbane Volunteer Spirit to expand volunteer opportunities. I was like, okay, can we, do something such as maybe adopt part of the Crocker Trail, get businesses to kick in some money to adopt trail, so that then we can do something with someone else's money. Why not?
The best.
We're looking at reimagining the entrance to town. And I like that we, talked about having a time frame for which to make a decision. And so we're doing that. But, after a couple of years, you might just say, what, either we're going to do this, or let's put it back on the market. And so that we can say that as a priority, like, okay, we're going to give ourselves a 2-year, like a really robust, diligent effort to seek the community's input and come up with something that's feasible. And if it doesn't, then we perhaps might look at doing something else with the property where we don't have the ownership.
To follow up on this,
Yeah.
my comment during the workshop was a desire to see us discuss these things holistically, understanding that if you build a project at Bank of America, the funds needed for rehab of community center may likely not be available, or doing something at the teen center. Like, I don't see within our financial state right now that we can do projects or major overhaul of those 3 sites. And so, yes, we could have a big public outreach. We could come up with this fabulous plan for Bank of America, but at some point we need to step back and say, what site is the most important to us, to the community? What are we going to prioritize? Just because it's there and available, and we've got now a plan, do we want to put all of the money that we have into that place? Because doing that may make, it may push the timeline for for community center 10 years from now, or we might have to, have a bond to do something like that. And so I'm just hoping that, we can circle back to thinking about these projects and how they
Totally.
affect each other.
You totally make sense there, Madison. We can only do so much. But, the teen center site, I don't think we owe any money on that. Right? It's just flat ground. The community center has got some maintenance issues, so that costs some money, even though we own it. Sure, we own the B of A site, but we are paying a significant amount of money every year in interest. So, those are those things that, okay, there's going to come a point where we need to make a move. And what that move is, I have no idea, but, giving ourselves a couple of years to figure it out seems reasonable. And I'm just putting that out there. It doesn't mean that we all have to agree to it.
100%.
That was the ask. And so, yeah.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
I would just say, I think it's, without us getting deeper, because it's not agendized for a big discussion on this, I think that this is a little departure, that these are our 3 priorities. It's going to give us a little different mindset. It's kind of signaling to the public that we're not earmarking anything. We're taking a very good overview and going deep into the budget to see where we're at. We have not done that, at least since I've been on the council. So I think this is a very healthy move, and we need to go through the process.
I agree. Okay, so open it up for public comment unless there's still more questions from council members. All right, anyone from the public want to make a comment, ask a question? I see no hands out in the audience. Anyone online? No one wants to do that at this time. Okay, so council discussion, seems like we were kind of into that. It seems like we're all good with it. So I'll entertain a motion unless we want to have further discussion. Okay. So someone make a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the council priorities as listed on the staff report.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Staff report, city manager's report, city updates and upcoming activities. Jeremy, please.
Thank you. Just give me a moment while I shift to those notes. Tonight, I wanted to focus on a couple events that are coming up in the next few weeks. April 22nd, Parks and Rec Commission will be holding a discussion of the Concert in the Park series in their subcommittee meetings. So if those who are interested in learning more about that, please attend. April 23rd, the developer of the proposed Guadalupe Quarry project will be holding a charrette open house that evening. The 26th is the Earth Day Habitat Restoration, and that will be 9:30 to 12:30 at Checker Spot and Rock Wren. The 26th, also, Silver Spot is holding its fundraiser, Touch a Truck, 400 Sierra Point, 10 to 12. Finally, on May 3rd, the Frog Habitat Restoration Project is 9:30 to noon, and you can attend that by going to Cypress Lane and Crocker Park Trail. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Manager Dennis. All right, so any county-wide assignments from anyone?
Always.
Okay. So I even asked, but I thought I would give others an opportunity here.
Always.
All right, Colleen, please.
Does anyone else want to go first?
I will go after you.
Okay.
This is my favorite part of the night.
Okay. Well, it's going to be brief, so pay attention.
Okay.
Okay. Peninsula Clean Energy. All I can tell you is there are so many things going on in the energy and regulation business due to changes in Washington. I think I mentioned to you that all the coastal offshore utilizing wave technology in order to generate electricity are just all off the table. So it's causing a shakeup everywhere. There's a lot of talk about are rates going to increase for electricity, and nobody knows. PCE's trying to take a very concerted path into moving forward on what are called DERs, which is distributed energy resources. A lot of the finances of PCE and staff are being all earmarked into this, and the way that you would see it is that more governmental buildings, such as our Mission Blue that has solar and will soon have battery, you're going to see more of that going on in all the peninsula communities and the PCE service territory, because we need that battery storage, keeps the rates down. What happens is PCE pays for the equipment, government signs an agreement 15, 20 years to buy the power at a really good rate that's cheap because it's a long-term contract from PCE. And during the off hours at night when there's no solar, there's still energy in the battery, and PCE can control that and distribute it to all of the customers, which keeps the rates low because then you don't have to go on the open market and buy very expensive power. That's the strategy to keep rates low by PCE. So you're going to see more talk. If you hear DERs, that's what they are. It's battery plus storage, commercial buildings, governmental buildings, and eventually more residential. But residential right now is expensive because the cost of all the electric appliances are unknown since so many are made in China. That's all my PCE. But I have CCAG for you. Double trouble here. What I can tell you there, very briefly, there are two projects having to do with 10192. I brought that up last meeting. It's really important to know that there are two separate projects. One is dealing with some incremental changes with the interchange. For instance, going northbound on 101 to 92, there's a backup at that exit. So they're talking about adding lanes. So that's just an example of little tiny incremental changes. The other large part, Project 2, which is not necessarily going forward and is gathering lots of opposition, is a major change to build a dedicated off-ramp from the San Mateo County Bridge that would take drivers right onto those express lanes, their own dedicated ramp to go north on express lanes or south. And in the process, it could eminent domain, nobody knows for sure how many, 36 homes in a low-income area. And so there is massive opposition to that. I'll tell you that the CCAG board expressed vehemently to all these project planners in the county that we were not in favor of anyone losing their homes. And if that project needed to be changed or terminated, that would be our desire, that nobody loses their homes. This is not the time to get rid of houses. The other discussion at CCAG is that within the Bay Area and MTC, there's talk about imposing a tax, and this would be for transit. And the way they would like to implement it is with sales tax. And they're doing all kinds of surveys to find out if people are in favor. And generally, if you ask people, would you pay more tax for transit? They go, sure, until you tell them, by the way, in your city, you're already paying this, and now you're going to pay that. And then sometimes they go, whoa, wait a minute. We don't want to do that. So it is still being discussed. all over the Bay Area. And I'll just keep you posted. There's resistance and there are some people in favor.
One thing that's interesting is when I was on CCAG, they were talking about imposing a fee, and they spent a lot of time doing different scenarios and different surveys on what would be able to be approved. And because they need a certain percentage of voters, they didn't, and it's really expensive to go to a countywide ballot. And so they really didn't want to go in with an ask that was too much or an ask that was too little to actually get whatever they needed done. And, you know, one of the things that they were funding at that time was the transit lanes, the dedicated lanes. And I'm not sure how those financially have worked out, but it was a very interesting process to see how they measure success or the ability for success on a ballot measure. And it takes a year or two to come back with all that information on what people are willing to bear.
And exactly what you said is exactly what's going on. They look at what is the possibility that a ballot measure would pass, how many general population, it's something like 66% of the population says, oh yes, we would support doing more funding for transit, until it comes down to here's a new tax. So they're trying to still weigh all of this out. When it will come to any culmination of yes or no, I can't tell you yet. And I would, are we out of counties?
Yeah, I was just, I have a couple of county assignments, but do you
Oh,
have?
no, go ahead then on
you-
county.
you
Just,
done? Okay. Frank, you have a county? Okay.
Oh, good.
Perfect.
This is a fun one. Last week, the San Mateo County had its night out at the ballpark, or San Mateo County Library had the night out at the ballpark. They were able to set up shop in China Basin, right on McCovey Cove, outside the park. They gave away hundreds of books on baseballs as free gifts. They had the hybrid Makers Mobile out there, which was really great. And I haven't gotten a final count yet, but the number of people that signed up for library cards, I imagine it's well over 100 to 200 people that were lined up to do that. So it was a really great event. I thank staff for supporting that and helping advertise that, and everybody who came out.
Wait, it was, so that was our library system?
What, San Mateo County Library, not our general Brisbane night out of the park.
No,
Different.
no, I know. It was at the
Oracle
ballpark.
Park.
So I'm surprised why it would be San Mateo County versus.
San Francisco County?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they invited all the counties to participate. And so,
Okay.
yeah, all the counties were out there.
And,
Oh.
and
We
that
just
was a
we
fu-
just happened to have
and
like
that
the
was a
best showing.
fundraiser too, right, for San Mateo County Libraries?
Yeah, it was a fundraiser as well. $5 from any ticket that you purchased, and any seat in the park went to San Mateo County Library.
Or was it divided amongst all the libraries?
No, San Mateo County Library. They had their own, what do you call it? Not QR code, own.
If
purchase
you bought
code.
it. Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
Got it.
Thank you, Frank.
That's it. Thank you.
Terry, do you have any county?
Trying to think. Nothing that was a public meeting, just planning sessions for the airport roundtable.
Madison?
No.
All right. Yeah, I had the county emergency response committee, so I'm on that representing Brisbane, and it was actually really fascinating when you go to the county's like war room, and they have all these screens and monitors, and when there's an emergency that's a major fire like the ones that they had on the coast, it's impressive. And so we had a nice presentation in regards to the hazmat operation that we have in the county. So it comes out of San Carlos. So they use their trucks and they go out, and then after they finish doing their job, they come back and those trucks become part of San Carlos's fire department. But having a hazmat team originated in San Mateo County. There was an incident back in the 60s, and they couldn't identify what the chemical was. And back then, we had more industrial in San Mateo County. We've gotten rid of a lot of that, but there was a lot of nasty chemicals, and the fire department was called in, and all the firefighters had to go to the hospital. And so that chief came up with a game plan, and it wound up being the standard that the rest of the nation followed. So I thought that was pretty neat. And then the other part of the meeting was the budget, and like a lot of cities, a lot of agencies having budget issues, and they rely a significant part of their budget on grants. And if those grants go away, all right, that's not a good way to fund your budget, but that's how they do it. So 15% of their budget is relying on grants, and if those grants don't come in, yeah, they'll have to make some cuts. I had a commute.org meeting this morning, and we had an update on the shuttles. So Samtrans is the one that negotiates the contract with the shuttle provider, and they were tasked with finding a new vendor and creating a new contract. However, they couldn't find a vendor who was willing to negotiate at a rate that Samtrans felt comfortable with. So as a backup, they're negotiating with the current vendor for a 2-year gig. So and the new contract was going to increase the rates by like 120%. So this 2-year extension is still brutal. It's 68 to 82%, but at least it's not the 120. So what does that mean for the shuttles in Brisbane? So the Transit Authority is going to kick in 75% of the cost of the shuttle. So that means that with our shuttle that goes from Brisbane to the Balboa BART station, that means that the city, which is part of a consortium of private partners, is going to have to come up with 25%. And so because it's a 2-year gig, those numbers haven't been finalized yet, but the difference from last year to this year, I believe, is $97,000 difference from what we were paying before. And so that's split into 2 years. So it's say about $50,000. There's another shuttle that we have. It's the Caltrain shuttle. And that one is funded by Caltrain. And we're hoping that Caltrain will continue to provide the funding for it, but there's no guarantee. If that were to happen, perhaps an option would be to consolidate the 2 shuttle routes. Right now we have 2 routes, but we have 3 shuttles. So the one that goes to the Balboa station, that comes every 30 minutes. We're the only shuttle, I believe, in the county that's got the 2, or it's every half hour. So the goal would be to perhaps consolidate, still receive some money from Caltrain, and then reroute so that you go to Caltrain and then to the Balboa BART
I always
station.
thought that made the most sense.
Could I ask you
Yeah,
a question?
Absolutely.
So you look at TDM plans, and one of them is employers giving employees commute vouchers. Is there any way so that we have a lot of employees that work in Brisbane,
Yeah.
Valley Drive, you can see them arrive in the morning,
Yeah.
that we could ask those employers to pay part of that portion?
They're
Because
required
I don't,
to.
I don't see why we should be subsidizing employees coming from other locations to work in Brisbane,
Yeah, that,
funding the shuttle.
yeah, so
Doesn't
that
make sense.
Yeah, so that consortium is voluntary.
I think if it's a
It's not
certain,
mandatory.
I thought it was. Of a certain amount of
Yes.
employees, you're supposed to be
Not.
contributing.
No. Now, there's a
Interesting.
commuter benefit program that if you have over 50 employees, you're supposed to comply with it, and it's a state mandate or law that is specific to the Bay Area, but that has nothing to do with funding the shuttle. They have a variety of things that they are supposed to do, but
Say again why it went up so much?
because it just
Contract
costs
went up.
money.
It's so interesting because commute.org, I've been engaging with them a lot in my other capacity, and they had like $100 million or some kind of crazy amount of money to spend on last mile sort of projects, things that run alongside the 101 corridor, meant to, alleviate some of the traffic on 101 by encouraging people to use alternative routes.
Yeah.
And the
their
shuttle that we
mission.
have is exactly that kind of project where, it's that last mile connecting you to a broader public transit system.
Yes.
And I wonder where did all of that money go that they've been saying that they're going to be spending throughout the county, when like this is an
Yeah.
existing project that meets all of
Yeah, so
those requirements.
commute.org isn't the bank for the shuttles. And I think a lot of people feel like that's the case. They manage it, but the money comes from the TA, it comes from other sources, businesses, cities, they all contribute. But the costs have gone up so much, as I mentioned, 68 to 82%. That's going to be the increase for the contract for the shuttle provider. So, and you have a voluntary, system. You're not, these companies aren't required. So it's a tough situation that we're in. Hopefully, Caltrain can kick in enough money and we do the consolidation, and we can continue to provide the service that our community and workers depend upon. I mean, you're right about we shouldn't be the ones funding, workers and things like that, but we're all part of that, the greater society of trying to reduce our carbon footprint and trying to reduce vehicles off the road, and so we all contribute as feasible, right? And we've been contributing to commute.org since its existence.
Well, perhaps it's time to direct staff to look at part of our business license tax to see if that's something that we're able to fund through that, even though we've mostly committed that to paying off other projects.
Some cities have different setups, and perhaps that could be something that we direct staff to evaluate how other cities require, because you can do it. Foster City has, I think, Gilead. I think they have a relationship with them, and they just have to pay.
So has commute.org, and this was through commute.org that your meeting was, have they submitted that to the city so that they can work that into the budget?
So
He's
the contract
shaking his head
has
no.
not. Yeah, no. The contract with the vendor has not been finalized, and as soon as that gets finalized, then commute.org will send out the information to all of the cities, but commute.org is committed to asking our businesses, say, hey, these rates are going up. Can we count on you? And hopefully they do provide the additional funding, but we don't know. And then we probably have about I want to say a couple of months to figure that all out, and then we'll make a decision.
Most organizations time their budgets in conjunction with city budgets, so that when costs are going up and things of that nature, that they give the city enough time to work it into their budget to see if it's going to be fiscally available for these communities. So hopefully they send a prediction of what the contract's going to be.
Yes.
Because, that would be the time, if they're already signing a contract, you'd think that they would want to know how many routes they're going to be running, and some communities are not going to be able to afford to continue the service levels that they currently have. And, you know, you hate to sign a contract for services you're not going to be able to utilize because you might be forced to pay for it anyway. So it's probably pretty important for commute.org to let their representatives know, and I'm glad that you're letting the staff know that this might be a potential that we need to add into our budget, you know, moving forward
Yeah,
beyond the normal CPI increase.
yeah, yeah. Well, let's just see if our businesses step up.
Through the chair, commute.org, John Ford has been in contact. So we've been aware that there may be something coming our way. We just don't have the number yet. So to give them some credit, yeah.
All right.
You know, and I'm curious. I'm just throwing this out there because I have used the Caltrain shuttle before, and I'm not seeing any sort of mechanized system for ridership counting. Throwing it out there just as a statement.
Yeah, I
So-
know that they do, but I don't know how they do it.
No
I know the
idea.
guys
I
got
just
little
hop on
clickers.
like it's a rental car shuttle, and
It's free
I'm over
and you
there.
get
Yeah.
on. I know,
So I don't
yeah.
know how they're doing their counting. It was just a statement.
Okay, good one. Okay, so then moving on to subcommittee meetings and report out of subcommittee meetings. Emergency Preparedness Subcommittee. Yes, Davis and Kern. I mean, it's pretty.
We both gave each other the same
We just
face.
gave each other the eyes.
I'll take it. So we met with North County Fire, PD, Public Works, Jeremy, and kind of discuss some ideas relative to preparing for an earthquake or major wildfire event. I'm trying to figure out how to say this. A lot of the things that we suggested, there was a lot of reasons why those wouldn't work. Like can we have an evacuation drill on the upper streets so people can get a feel for what that might be like? That was discouraged. But we did get an agreement to play a siren, evacuation siren, so people could familiarize themselves with the sound.
We
An
used to have
evacuation
that. I
siren.
remember. I haven't heard it in years.
Well, every
So-
morning they run a siren, but San Francisco did a Tuesday at noon drill.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
Whatever.
exactly.
Tuesday at noon.
Pacifica does it as
At
well.
noon, yeah.
The tsunami sirens. So that might be an option to just start playing that siren more frequently so people can get accustomed to what it sounds like. We also talked about, maybe ways that we could engage with the community to, know your neighbor type of communications, so that if there's somebody who's elderly on your block and there is a disaster, you know to go and help them. We just talked about doing like a ongoing communications piece on this. Like one thing might be in the Star, and it might be a cutout where it says like, in the event of emergency, make sure you grab this list of things. And it's like a checklist that has, important documents, passports, whatever, sentimental items, so that when you're in that state of mind, you can just look on your fridge and it'll help you. And then, but I was told that North County Fire has hired this marketing company called Blue Flamingo that really specializes in communicating with the public about these kinds of things. So they're already going to be doing some marketing initiatives around this, some, like emergency preparedness short clips that we can then help also get the word out about. Is there anything you wanted to add?
I think it was a learning for me that North County Fire has a podcast, which I think is pretty amazing. And I think that there's ways to repurpose. We talked about ways of repurposing that podcast in other communication channels, either having AI scripted out and putting it into social media or doing something along those lines. So that was, I think that was a big learning. Madison, you opened that up. I'm sorry, Councilmember Davis, you opened that up with talking about having seniors have friends in the event of an emergency. And I will say to Mayor Lentz that we heard that during our age-friendly presentation as well, is that folks were yearning for that kind of sort of volunteerism and buddyship for helping in an emergency. So that came up again in this subcommittee.
Nice, nice. And, you know, and I apologize. I had a flyer that I was supposed to bring today from the emergency response meeting last night, and I will make sure that I give it to staff. There's an event at the county, I guess they don't call it the Expo Center anymore, but it's on April 26th, and it's about, you know, how to come up with evacuation plans and things like that. So hopefully you get more, you know, greater engagement. So,
Can I make a comment? Dovetailing off of the LA fires, one of the things I saw a documentary, firefighters repeatedly were getting these desperation calls from elderly going, please come get me out. And it was already too late. And so to have someone aware there's an elderly person is
Yes.
great, but that doesn't mean that who takes the responsibility? I think they almost need buddies,
Yeah.
more than one, because one might not be available, that maybe even three, that if there's an emergency, one of these buddies is going to go retrieve them. And the other thing that nobody thinks about, a lot of people were trying to get back to their homes when they were on fire to go rescue their dogs and cats.
Yeah.
And then those people perished. So if there was a buddy system that, okay, if something happens, you're going to come grab my dog or my cat if possible, that's also just overlooked. And it could save a person's life.
Yeah, that's a good point. We were talking about more like instead of we were talking about more of like an official list, but the city talked about the challenges of keeping that updated, and like there's probably not going to be the resources to go and track down all those people, but you know, a Know Your Neighbor program initiative on your block to just, you know, figure out who might need help. But I think pets is also a great one too.
But we have this imperative, our priority as a council is volunteers. And I've had many people in town say, if you organize volunteers to deal with evacuations and things, I'm in. They don't want to be CEVs, but they're willing to get involved in their block. And the last time Brisbane had a fire, I don't remember what year, 2009 on the mountain, I believe. And everybody in our block who didn't know each other came out on the street, and we got to know each other very fast. And so that getting just acquainted with your immediate neighbors is huge.
Through the chair, the subcommittee did discuss the CERT concept a bit with the chief, and got some history from both the chief and from Randy, who attended the meeting. It's something that I'm continuing to have some interest in, which is exactly what Councilmember Mackin is describing, some version of the window check or windshield check that you could have on each block.
yeah. Yeah, you know, I signed up for the CERT program when it was available recently, and you know, I wound up just having way too much on my plate, so I could only attend one of the meetings. But those meetings are long, and there was it was really dense material. And granted, there's a lot going on, and it's important information. But if there was a lighter version that more people could digest, I think we'd get more people interested in participating and then becoming those block leaders that you're all talking about.
We also talked about, like, I was saying maybe if we had something in person, a little bit more engaging, like on Zoom, you can only watch a Zoom meeting for so long before you're like half asleep. But and that was not really.
Well, we could have
They
events.
They did not agree with that either.
Different areas, different blocks, and say, okay, this week, these blocks are going to have a get together, make it of something fun, get acquainted.
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm glad that you guys are doing this. I think we need to give more direction to the chief, saying, hey, you know, we're the council, and we'd like to implement these things, and you need to help us figure that out.
Well, some things should involve North County Fire.
Yeah.
And some things shouldn't, because we have a contract with them, and that would possibly make our costs go up. And we're using, uniformed people, high-priced uniformed people to do something that, we could more able to, through one of our existing organizations, have a buddy system. It's sort of like pulling a cracker. It's like whoever's your neighbor on each side,
Yeah.
you're going to watch out for them. And that's something people can get their head around, whether they like their neighbor or not. But, at least you'd know.
Yeah.
You know when your neighbor's home most
No,
of the time.
absolutely.
You know when they're
whatever
not.
makes sense, right? And obviously, we don't want to just have the fire department do everything, and right then that wouldn't be feasible. But there could be some things, and some of the things that you guys were talking about make sense.
We're working on it.
Yeah.
We're working on it.
Good. Good. Thank you so much. All right, let's move on to item B, Sierra Point Parks and Open Space Subcommittee. Councilmember Kern, would you like to give us a update?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This was my first Sierra Point Park and Open Space Subcommittee. Mayor Lentz and I met with Noreen, Randy, and Jeremy. And we took a look at the landscape architecture plans that were provided in 2022 and 23 by CMG, just to revisit that and kind of get re-familiar about what was proposed and the research that was done. Sea level rise is definitely front of mind for this committee, but as a reminder, this subcommittee is focused on enhancing the parks and open space at Sierra Point Parkway. There's going to be some obvious opportunities on the go forward for this subcommittee to partner with other subcommittees, namely Sea Rise and the Sierra Point / Marina subcommittees. So in talking through some of the things that we were looking at and what we wanted to move forward, we were thinking that there was a possibility to look at a simplified sort of revised plan for out there that would take into account a prioritized, coordinated, and phased approach. A crucial part of working with some of the other subcommittees on this is a holistic approach that integrates Parcel R, some broader amenity concepts, and the future of the marina, with a strong emphasis on preserving, utilizing, and implementing natural landscape wherever possible. The subcommittee has directed staff to work with CMG to develop a streamlined plan based upon previous work, and with the incorporation of our most recent sea level rise study results combined with any additional data points, and when I say data points, I mean additional because we already have plenty, from ABAG, Caltrans, BCDC, One Shoreline, or any other newly available sources that we have. I think where we landed was we wanted to create sort of a minimum viable product with a keen eye on sea level rise in protecting what we have out there. A potential example on something like that is the east side of the Bay Trail along the marina. And that is where things were left off. Did I miss anything?
No. I think you hit on all the items, and we basically took feedback from the council and then put that into motion with how we conducted the meeting.
So on your next steps section, it says have staff talk with CMG about options. I'm not sure, and maybe this is a question for staff. Didn't we use all the funds that were in the CMG contract?
No, we still have some remaining funds.
I thought we went over budget.
I believe that I will confirm with staff.
We have remaining funds in the Parcel R parks, but we overstepped, from what I understand. We overspent on our contract with CMG from what the council had approved.
I'll confirm with staff.
We didn't do that. There's I think we spent $113,000. I think there's like $80-something thousand left in the contract.
But we never, and also we, as a council, we did not go forward with any of the recommended plans. We didn't recommend accepting any of the plans that were provided.
Yeah,
And
no,
so
we,
I would be,
we're in agreement with that too. We decided that all the concepts, we're just gonna put them in the can and start fresh. But there, like Frank said, there's a body of work that's, important that we've already collected.
okay.
I had the same kind of question in that where we left off on it was that the council had talked about sea level rise being the most important thing out there. We had sea level rise study that Randy brought back, a couple months ago. And it identified the potable water problems and the storm drains. And a part of the discussion we seem to have had last year when we last talked about Sierra Point and Park was that it was parcel R, and that anything else that we would touch might end up being modified just because with sea level rise, things have to be torn up. You got to dig up the ground. You got to move things. The restrooms are part of the park, and those are already suffering from groundwater intrusion and king tides. The water is literally coming under the floorboards in those restrooms. So when we talk about amenities, I heard you mention amenities. I'm not sure I'm a little confused by your report because it mentions amenities and some terminology that's, I don't know what you're referencing. And I think it's really important that we know exactly what you're doing, because we kind of pulled back and said, let's not put good money after bad. At Sierra Point with Park, we've got to identify what needs to be addressed with the sea level rise first, so that things aren't torn up or that we don't plan something that's not feasible. So, and I thought we had pulled it back to parcel R because we know that's feasible. Am I completely off base, Madison? Hello?
I mean, I went back and watched the last time we discussed this, and what I said several times in that meeting was that, by focusing just on parcel R, you aren't, and this kind of speaks at what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Let's say, yeah, we do need to relocate the bathrooms, and and all these other things need to get relocated. And like, what land do you have left that makes sense for everything to go? Mm-hmm. And if you are only just planning parcel R, then you may need some of that for other infrastructure. And so I think you do have to look at everything
from the
altogether.
Standpoint of sea level rise.
Right.
But until you do that, how can you look at everything, because you don't know if it's underwater or how to mitigate that? So I get the whole thing of not having tunnel vision, just looking at parcel R, but there are immediate things that need to be dealt with, like water under the bathrooms. That's not going to be sanitary. The storm drains and the potable water, before you can figure out what to locate. And I'm not the expert, so there could be parts of parcel R where.
Frank, you got something to say?
That's going to be the ask of CMG, is saying, we're looking at sea rise right now. It's now become our priority is to look at that. These are the issues that we know that we have. Here's the infrastructure that we know is currently at risk that we may need to move. And please help us come up with a plan where we might take a phased approach, probably starting with parcel R, and making sure that that all works together on the go forward. And as more funding becomes available.
Well, what's different now is that we have that study too that
Right.
says here's the 5 or 10-year problems,
All the way
the
through 100
30-year
years.
problems,
Yeah.
the 100-year problems. Here's what's gonna go and when, and we never had that before.
But it doesn't tell how to mitigate it all.
But that's what
the problem.
CMG can help
But
with.
They are not
CMG's
sea
not,
level
they're
people.
architects. They're not
So,
experts on sea level rise. And
well,
I keep trying to emphasize that because I went through the Chrissy Field floods, and that was CMG. They had major, major water problems for 3 months. You need someone who really understand sea level rise. Landscape architects, it's like hiring a dentist to do a colonoscopy because they know how to do root canals. You need someone who really understands.
That might be one
Was
of my
a heck
favorite.
I
of a
thought
stretch.
you'd enjoy that.
I'm trying to block
This
that
meeting is
image out of my
recorded.
mind.
No, it's a good analogy. My point being, you really want an expert who knows what they're doing. You don't want to roll the dice on someone you think, well, this is
Well,
kind of
you know,
in their
you are
wheelhouse.
you are absolutely right.
Yeah, I
You're
agree.
absolutely right about that, Colleen. And that's why we hired CMG in the first place, because they do have the expertise. When Terry and I were looking at the various firms, CMG has the chops. They have worked on numerous projects around the shoreline. In fact, they are one of the, I don't know if it's a consultant or partnership. We just recently received grant money for the lagoon. One Shoreline hired or brought on CMG to work with them to come up with the proper strategy to provide the mitigation strategy for how we deal with our lagoon.
I think I have to beg to differ and just, we're going to have to agree to disagree
Well,
because
yeah.
I'm not convinced that that's CMG's expertise.
Oh, well,
I think they're very good at coastal parks. I've been to their website. I've looked at all their developments. I just think that I wouldn't want to put all my eggs in one basket
and
with CMG.
nor would we. We're not doing that. You know, and CMG is not the firm that you would hire to do all of the deep analysis of how you would do the infrastructure of the whatever strategy we decide to do. You and I were at the meeting the other day, and basically it comes down to two options: either build a wall like they did in Foster City, and there's issues with that, or use native vegetation and slope it up, which,
Excuse me, that was your assumption. That we don't know that those are the only options. That was your statement. We weren't told those are our only options. That's a statement that you personally made. And that's not what any expert told us. So I think it's important to make that distinction, not as an affront to you. I understand where you're coming from. That's kind of an easy assumption, but I think it's more complex than that.
I apologize if I'm kind of simplifying it. I mean, obviously, whatever we would do, it would be a lot more complex. But when you look at what is the gold standard, what would BCDC want? It is using native vegetation and sloping up. Not all jurisdictions have the land. That's why places like Millbrae and Burlingame are going to have to do something different. But we actually have land, and where we could plant native vegetation. And once you have a plan in place, then we're able to get the grant money. And so we just want to get information for the council. That's really where it is. We're not saying this is how we're going to do it. We're just saying, hey, we want to learn, we want to get more information so that all of us can make better decisions.
We have to pay CMG anyway, right? Like, we have a contract with them, and so, like, we have 80,000 left that is, we already committed to spending. Is that how this works?
No, we don't have to spend the money.
Okay.
No.
So,
I think also, last year, Madison, you brought up a meeting we had last year. There was discussion about vegetation, and Randy had brought up, you have to be careful what you put out there because you can end up clogging the channel. It takes over, and you can't dredge it. So this is where I think it's very complex, and it's really important that we do due diligence, and there are at least 4 or 5 different agencies involved. They're all there to provide input. I wouldn't put all my eggs in the basket of CMG. I think we need to do some homework on it.
Yeah, and I totally agree. We're not saying that. What we're saying is that we got something that we've already paid for, and it's a good foundation. If you you know, for one shoreline to partner with CMG, there must be a reason for that, right? And so-
What foundation are you alluding to? Because that escapes me. I really don't understand what you're talking about. The CMG Foundation, what was the foundation? It was a park with all kinds of
well,
features and hills and exercise areas and sitting areas and a big green. I mean, that's
yeah,
when you say foundation, what are we talking about? The foundation with CMG?
Given the hour and the fact that we were supposed to have a special meeting an hour ago,
Thank you.
I think that, you know, maybe we should continue this as a more agendized, you know, discussion. Maybe the council needs to think about what direction the subcommittee should have. I think that the subcommittee is really trying to, hey, we have this money, we have to spend it, the 1.5 million. We're trying to, you know, take into consideration sea level rise and figure out how we move forward on this thing that we already got started. And there's a lot of concerns which I think are all valid. And I feel like maybe the subcommittee we need to talk about it more so the subcommittee has maybe some clear
Well,
direction.
you know, if it would be okay with the council to let us work with staff, work with One Shoreline and CMG to come back with some guidance of where we potentially could go.
How about a starter minimum viable product?
Yeah.
So first of all, let me get this straight, and maybe we don't have an answer tonight, maybe we do. CMG completed their contract with us with their work product, correct?
No.
What-
And we still
what
have
res-
remaining funds as well.
You have funds with them for work product that we haven't decided what we want from them for the remaining funds?
No. Let me rephrase. We have received a work product that could be considered complete. That's a fair statement. We also have a remaining amount of money that is available to us if we want to continue to do work with them.
So there's no money that they are currently under contract with. And normally subcommittees have a limit on how much they can spend without coming back for approval from the city council. And I think that was 1,000, maybe it was 2,500 that a subcommittee could do. I think it's 1,000.
Maybe 2 max.
Maybe, and again, we'll have to look back, and we had to implement that rule for a variety of reasons. And so I'm assuming that unless we're talking about having a 15-minute meeting where you can spend $1,000, that this is going to need to come back to us before you move forward involving CMG or any other consultant on producing any kind of work product or recommendations to that subcommittee. So I just want to reiterate that there's money still in the fund, but there isn't an existing request for work product on that.
Yeah.
And I agree, Councilmember O'Connell.
Yeah.
I think CMG should come to a meeting.
Yeah, I mean,
Would pay.
we're not trying to come up with a work product. We're just trying to gather information so that we can make more intelligent, decisions. And look at, if it's the council's pleasure not to move forward with any additional money that is beyond what has already been allocated. I mean, I don't know what the details are. I mean, there might be a little bit of money still left. Who knows? Or maybe it's all been extinguished except for what?
There's $80,000 left.
I know there's $80,000
In the fund, yes.
Yeah, and so
That's
I'm-
budgeted, yes.
Yeah, right. That the city council already agreed to, but it appears as if though that we're not obligated to pay it. The rest because we're not going to get additional work from them. but we could get information that might help us, help the committee, subcommittee, to give the full council a little bit more guidance. And that's all we're asking, is just to continue to do the work. I mean, this is really just an update, and to see how sea level rise would impact, any kind of park planning.
Isn't that the sea level rise subcommittee to start there though? Because we have to examine sea level rise throughout the whole city. So it seems to me, in terms of the park subcommittee, I would just recommend you start with identifying structures and items that are already currently under threat that need to be dealt with in some manner. Just identify all the problem areas and then start thinking about what do we do with that? And there's a lot of agencies you could contact for ideas, other cities, what they've done, or just come back to the council with some information. I don't think we need to spend money with CMG to get there. That's the part I think that,
Okay, so
Yeah.
maybe that's the direction, right? We don't spend any money with CMG, but we continue to do what we can with what we got. Is that okay? All right, good. All right, so I
And-
see. I get
And then
the
just a
nodding.
question for staff. Jeremy, in that meeting, did we not discuss a concept in which we went back to CMG and we just said, can you provide us with any additional guidance if we were to strip this plan down to a minimum viable product? I thought we discussed doing something.
That
along
is
those
what the
lines.
subcommittee wished to recommend to the council tonight.
Got it.
Are we good? Are we good with that?
I don't, so are you saying to strip down the plan for the park with the features? Again, I don't know.
Features. We're not even we're not going to do any features.
So when I saw their plans, they had 3 versions.
I know they did.
It was
And,
features. So what
We're-
is the foundation plan that you're talking about is what I'm asking.
It's from 2022. So in 2023, they came out with the renditions, and people were upset about the renditions. And the boating community did not get an opportunity to contribute prior to those renditions. And that was a mistake. And so we don't want to do that again. And so those renditions that were out there, they're just going in the can. But there was some good information that was accumulated in 2023. And so now it's like, okay, how do we make it right? Because we got to spend the $1.5 million.
How about you come back to the council with more specificity of what the basic foundation plan is? Because I
That's
still
what we're
don't know.
requesting help with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
But you don't need CMG to do that. That's what I'm saying.
But we think that we do. You don't think that we do, but we feel that it's important. And so, and because they are a respected entity in the field, and we've already hired them, and we've already received information from them.
Are we going into a discussion more than what's a report out from a subcommittee?
I feel like we
And-
are too. And
Well, I'm not, through the chair, I'm not necessarily uncomfortable with the discussion right now because the intention of this item that we've constructed here with the various subcommittees is intended to provide direction back to the subcommittee. So you have to have some level of discussion in order to do that.
I just feel like it's kind of too late in the evening, and we have like a whole other meeting.
So, okay,
to be
so if,
figuring this out.
can the subcommittee move forward without spending any money with CMG and gather more information then?
Certainly.
So, right, is that good? Okay, so
That'd be
just
good.
in the effort to just move the process along, let's move on to item C, liaisons to OSEC subcommittee.
We met with OSEC, and we talked about their very full work plan, reviewing the quarry, Baylands developments, and then also a little bit was added because of the PG&E acquisition of the San Francisco's acquisition of PG&E infrastructure and the resulting draft environmental impact report that mentions Brisbane very specifically. And so I think that they said there was no problems. They're working group was working very well together. The committee was working well together, and so we approved their work plan in generality, and their work plan is on the website.
They have a really comprehensive work plan. I applaud it's really easy to understate the number of things that they do regularly throughout the year, and they're very serious about it. I'm very appreciative to their efforts. They take it seriously, and they're ready to dive into the DEIRs. So, yeah, I am very grateful for the members of that committee.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Moving on, upcoming subcommittees. Economic Development Subcommittee is happening on 4/24. Discuss rebranding of economic development to economic vitality. And yeah, then Public Art Advisory Committee on 4/28. Anybody have any item or any questions or any guidance to? All right. So item 3, proposed subcommittees. I know that we have, we're going to do a school 2x2. I don't see it on here, but we're still, I guess it's in the works.
I believe staff is scheduling that.
All right, thank you. Okay, so with that, we will adjourn to our
Written communications?
workshop.
We need oral communications too,
And then written correspondence also.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't.
and written communications.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for your.
I like where your
help
head's at,
there,
though.
Terry. I appreciate it every time. So, okay, oral communications number 2. Anybody out there would like to ask us a question or comment? Sir, please come on up.
You get the gold star for the evening. Way to wait it out.
Wow. Regarding the saltwater, rise of sea level, the only thing I can speak to is, and it's going to deal with some of the questions, is in Boston when they built the tunnel, Massachusetts didn't have a hydrologist, and it really put the project off years and years. And one of the things that they studied was what the Dutch were doing, because the Dutch have been dealing with this problem forever. And getting to CMG, I'm sure they have hydrologists. California does not have a state hydrologist for some strange reason. But, and I was at this meeting last year when the priorities for energy would be the infrastructure. Because if you don't move the infrastructure, then whatever value it provides to businesses and everything else down in that area would be undermined fairly quickly. And one of the things you're talking about is the bathroom. That is also is part of the infrastructure. And then in the boaters, I think they brought up the seawall. And I don't know the value, as far as in terms of revenue for the city for any of those activities. With respect to native plants, that was tried by the Dutch as well. And it didn't work. And their solution was crazy expensive. But I think CMG, and I'm not a fan, by the way, but they know who to hire, for these studies. They're an A company, so they have engineers on their staff. I just think that your idea of looking beyond, because their idea of a park I thought was ridiculous. I said, we don't need, what are they going to do? Next thing, a Ferris wheel down there? We have that crazy estuary that's going to undermine whatever efforts they're going to have with the short-term sort of stuff. I think identifying priorities, and these are going to be time-based, probably not cost-based, unfortunately, but priorities, time-based. If someone goes into the bathroom and you can't sit down without an inner tube, well, that's a problem. But that infrastructure, that's a big ticket item. That's going to require county and state money. I don't know how that would be handled, but I think the raw bones of it should be prioritized first. than the stuff that might add value into the future, whether it's improvement into a park or whatever else. That's all secondary stuff. Just want to say thanks. Oh,
Yeah, thank you.
I think you guys.
And thank you for attending our meeting. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So written communications, I should have done that first. So, but since we already went into oral communications, is there anybody online that would like to ask a question that's not on our agenda? Sorry, make comments.
Mr. Mayor, I do want to recognize Caracas sent in correspondence regarding parking regulations, Lawrence San Mateo Law Library, Straw Pickleball, Hebert Silver Spot, Lee Silver Spot, Veray Silver Spot, Campbell Silver Spot, Citron Silver Spot, Mitchell Silver Spot, Bosque Silver Spot, Pape K Silver Spot, Rosas Silver Spot, Roser Silver Spot, Galvan Quarry, and this evening we received correspondence from Cunningham regarding item N.
All right, thank you. Okay, so now we'll adjourn to our workshop.